All right, well, good evening, everybody, and happy Sunday. It is a very windy evening here in Miami. You know, we're actually starting off the stream in a little bit of a different location. What you're looking at right now is Brickell Key, and we are looking directly at the Mandarin Oriental Hotel. You know, if you look right behind the hotel, there's actually a full moon out, but I think just 2 seconds before I started the stream, the clouds sort of went over the full moon, and there's a crazy heat lightning storm. So hopefully we'll be able to see 2 heat lightning storms in a row, obviously on yesterday's stream and tonight's stream. But it is Sunday. Hope everybody enjoyed the weekend, but it is back to business tomorrow. Now, I quickly took a glance at futures. I think we are slightly positive across the board. I think the ticker symbol ES for the S&P 500 E-mini futures contracts are up fractionally. I think it's the same thing across the board with the NASDAQ and the Dow Jones. But we are going to be getting some key economic data Monday, May 16th. We are going to hear from Take-Two Interactive Software, which is a big video game company. They are going to be reporting quarterly earnings after the bell. But we are also going to be hearing from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York as it releases its Empire State Manufacturing Survey for May. Yes, and the consensus estimate is for a reading of 18.2 after 3 readings closer to or less than 0 to begin the year. April saw a surge to 24.6, indicating growth in the region's manufacturing activity overall. So we are going to pay very, very close attention to that. Obviously, last week we got a higher than expected CPI print, but a little bit less talking about month over month. But inflation did come in a little bit hotter than economists expected, right at around 8.5% on the CPI. And we're going to talk about a lot more. Also, Walmart and Target are reporting earnings. I think that is very important to talk about, and we will do that. But first, everybody, let's see who we have in the chat. The one and only Horatio Snipes is here. What's up, Horatio? Otto, welcome. Henry says, hi, I can't believe I'm the first person to like this video. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Jonathan Richards is here. Lila says, hey, Tom, everybody. Daniel G is joining us from Buenos Aires, Argentina. Anna is here. Lena Sandoval. Good to see you. Grant. Welcome, Grant. Good to see you, man. So Grant also runs a radio station. Feel free to link it in the description. Very unique. Ooh, guys, the clouds are actually moving out now. You guys see this? There's actually a full moon over Miami tonight. Nick Rocks is here. British Gray says, happy Sunday, Tom. Let's see who else we have. We have Jonathan Richards, the one and only Vinny Castellano. Welcome, Vinny. We have By the Book. Good to see you. Says, hey, Tom, and everybody. Sunshine After Rain. Welcome. Good to see you. Carson says, hey, Tom, ready for the week. Yeah, it's going to be a pretty action-packed week. You know, aside from the manufacturing data we're going to get from Empire State, we are also going to be getting some key housing data as well. So we are going to hear from the National Association of Realtors in relation to home sales month over month. We're supposed to be getting some pretty bearish readings on that, so I will keep you guys up to date. But, you know, I think they delivered the Miami Herald, which is the local newspaper here. I think they delivered it to my house by mistake. So I actually was reading a really, really crazy article about the unreal craziness in the housing market here in Miami, where a lot of foreign buyers are actually coming in paying well over asking. And it's driving up the price of real estate, but the bad thing is for the locals and the natives in Miami, it's sort of pricing them out of the market. And it's a double whammy because if you look at the median rents here in Miami, the numbers actually just came out over the weekend. The median rent here in Miami is $4,300 a month. Yes, that is not a typo. That is not fake news. Crazy. The median rent in Miami is $4,300 a month. And now that we have a lot of foreign buyers coming in Miami buying the single family housing units as well as duplexes, triplexes, and multifamily, it's really putting a lot of the locals in a tight spot, right? Because not only are getting outbid from traditional houses, you know, now if they want to go rent somewhere, you know, they have to deal with the crazy rental spikes. And we were talking about this a couple I think it was a couple months ago now when we were talking about the median rental prices in New York City, and those median rental prices are about $4,300 as well. So Miami is now just as expensive, if not more expensive, than New York, which is absolutely crazy. So we'll talk more about that tonight on the stream. Yeah, buy the book says that's ridiculous rent, isn't it? It's crazy. So I was reading an article in the Miami Herald today. I don't subscribe to that newspaper, but I think they must have delivered it to me or somebody. But yeah, the median rent in Miami is $4,300, $4,300, and this is the same median rent as it is in New York City. So Miami is becoming just as expensive as New York, if not more expensive. Really, really bizarre, crazy times we're living in here. And I actually think the inflation rate, so obviously last week we got the CPI numbers, about an 8.5% reading. But if you drill down into the localities, I actually think the inflation rate is higher here in Florida than it is in New York. Pretty wild stuff. Sunshine After Rain is here. Hey, Sunshine, good to see you. Dante Rose says, Tom, are you watching the eclipse tonight? You know, I'm not familiar with an eclipse, but there is a beautiful full moon right here. This is Brickell Key, and this is a very, very expensive hotel, the Mandarin Oriental. And we walk past the Mandarin Oriental all the time in New York City, now in the Deutsche Bank Towers, formerly known as the Time Warner Center. So it is a beautiful night here in Miami. I would take you guys across the river here to Brickell Key, but I don't think the internet's going to hold up, to be honest. So I think we'll just stay on this side, and I'll show you guys the beautiful views from here. But good to see you, Dante Rose. Somebody says solar eclipse is coming on in 2 years. Okay, we'll be streaming it. We'll do it. We'll just be sure not to look directly into the eclipse like our former president. Lilla, good to see you. This is the same thing is happening in Tucson. Nobody could afford a house there on the wages they paid. Yeah, so Lilla, you actually make a really good point. Tucson, Arizona. Arizona is one of the states where housing prices really inflated. I think just as much as Miami. And I think the main reason for that was because during COVID, everybody wanted to escape, what's it called? The freezing weather. I mean, if you're working from home, you know, why would you want to work from home in a tundra blizzard? Why not work from home and, you know, at least have it sunny out? So those are definitely the two key places. Arizona experienced a huge boom in housing. Same thing with Southern Florida and all parts of Florida too. But, you know, if we think back to what happened in 2008, during the 2008 housing crisis or the financial crisis, if you look at the markets that actually crashed the hardest, they were Southern Florida, parts of Arizona, as well as Nevada. So this could be, you know, is it history repeating itself? Is it going to be a little bit different this time? As you guys know, that is always the sort of last words of the death wish on Wall Street by saying it may be different this time. But maybe it is, maybe it's not. But usually at the end of cycles, places like Arizona, places like Nevada, more specifically Las Vegas, and Florida, more specifically Miami, tend to see really rapid price appreciations in not only housing, or single-family housing, excuse me, but also apartments as well. So hopefully as interest rates are increasing here, you know, if we look at that 30-year mortgage, it's at about 5%, the first time since 2011. So hopefully that'll put some pressure on pricing here. Hopefully it can sort of cool off a lot of this irrational exuberance here. Nick Rock says, hey Tom, also if I remember correctly, the virus wasn't supposed to thrive in the heat. Boy, somebody was wrong. Yeah, I mean, you know, I think actually, regardless of what people say, I actually think both the Trump and the Biden administration, regardless of how incompetent they both may be, I actually think they did a pretty decent job with the virus as opposed to other places in the world. I mean, if you look at China, they're still dealing with this craziness of being locked down. It's almost like a prison over there. And here in the United States, we're rocking. We're ready for business. So I think both the Biden and Trump administrations actually did a pretty good job, in my view. And I think the Biden administration continues to do a good job with that. And I think the Trump administration did a good job with getting this vaccine out in a faster time than any place around the world. So I think that, I would say, both administrations are actually doing a pretty decent job. If we look at other parts of the world that are still locked down, I mean, here you go to New York, everything's open. Florida, everything's open. Pretty much the United States is open for business. Let me check who else we have in the chat. I know I've been missing a lot of people. Hey, Sebastian, good afternoon. Julio is here. Good afternoon, Julio. Flowers in her hair says, hey, Tom, can we see the moon? Yes. So yes and no, flowers in her hair. If you look directly above the Mandarin Oriental Hotel, you can see a little piece of the full moon, but it seems as if we have clouds moving in and out. I think some of the clouds are parting right now, so you could actually see a little bit. If you look directly to the right of the main Mandarin Oriental sign, you'll be able to see the full moon. Hey, Cosmo Scary is here. Hey, what's up, Cosmo? Good to see you. Hopefully you had a good weekend. Always a pleasure to have Cosmo Scary in the chat. Tyrese says, hey, Tom, welcome. Sally is here. Good to see you, Sally. Audi 1996, always a pleasure. Dutchman says, Tom, a one-bedroom apartment, 700 square feet in Phoenix is $1,800. Wow, that's like New York City prices. That's like New York City prices. That's insane. Yeah, but I mean, think about that, guys. I mean, the median rental price here in Miami is now matching that of New York City. I never would have expected that in a million years, but $4,300, that's nuts. That's really nuts. The ABX girl is here. Welcome, ABX girl. Hopefully you had a good weekend. Steve says, hey, Tom, greetings from Vancouver. Love Vancouver. So, Steve, I was actually reading an article this week in the Wall Street. Oh, look at these dogs here. In the Wall Street Journal in relation to Canada's housing market. So the Canadian Central Bank is going to raise interest rates. So hopefully that'll bring the prices of homes down in Canada. But if you look at things on a relative basis, everybody really focuses on the United States, probably because we are pretty much the gold standard for the rest of the world. But if you want to talk about a potential real estate type bubble in the United States, if you actually look at prices in Canada and in other parts of the world, bubbles are actually raging like twice the size in places like Canada and China. So if you look at it on a relative basis or a relative valuation basis, the United States actually could have a little bit of a ways to go here in terms of real estate prices. I think the average price of a home in Canada or Toronto is almost $1 million, which is insane. I don't even know how people do it there. I really don't. It's insane. But hopefully things will come down. Yeah, Wendy England says, Tom, the Vancouver real estate is nuts. So what are you guys seeing there? I mean, we have a ton of Canadian viewers, which is great. It's better to get the information from you guys as opposed to me reading an article. But what are you guys seeing? Is the Canadian real estate market, or in Toronto or Vancouver, is it starting to cool off a little bit, or is it still raging? Ruby Falcone is here. Hey, Ruby, hopefully you had a good weekend. Don Smith says, any news on COVID mortgage forbearance? So I think a lot of that stuff is quite over now. The only thing that really hurt a lot of the landlords, fourth quarter saying sea level looks really high. Dude, it is high. Check this out. So just to give you guys perception here, this is where I'm standing and the water is splashing up on top. It almost kind of looks surreal here. But so the forbearance thing was really what hurt a lot of, and the rental forbearance as well was what hurt a lot of small business mom and pop landlords, which I think caused a lot of trust issues there. The ABX girl says, hey, Tom, our Canadian friends, GST tax included in the home price. I'm not sure. DWG is here, says hello from Canada, good to see you. Brian, welcome. Ooh, wow, guys, check this out. I think we have a perfect view of the full moon here. British Gray says, Tom, the foreclosure or the forbearance is over and people are starting to get evicted now in parts of the country, but it's still very hard in places like New York, more democratic cities. I would say it's very, very hard to evict even still. Samsung says, you heard India banned wheat exports. Yeah, I mean, supply chain is really, really messed up. You know, we were talking about this on the stream yesterday, that I think the number one biggest issue that's going to come out of this Ukraine-Russia war is not the actual casualties of a direct result of bullets flying and bombs going off. It's actually all of the people that are going to starve this year due to the fact that Ukraine and Russia are going to miss a key growing season. And the vast majority of the world's wheat comes out of the Ukraine, Russia area. So it's really horrible what's going to go on with sort of all of these shortages, especially food shortages that are going to come out of this war here, which is really, really tragic. Crystal225 says, good evening. Welcome, Crystal. Good to see you. NNB045 says, Tom, yes, I'm Canadian. It's cooling off because of the rate hikes, especially in Montreal. Well, that's good. I mean, you know, I've been reading some articles that the same exact thing that's going on in the United States in relation to people paying, you know, 30% over asking, 10% over asking, waiving necessary inspections. That stuff isn't only exclusive to the United States. It's going on in Canada. And if you look at, as we talked about just a couple of minutes ago, on a relative basis, if you look at places in China, places in Canada, that bubble is actually way, way bigger, and valuations are way, way more stretched, even in comparison to the United States. Eugene says, Tom, Fortinet on my Xbox needs an update. 10 gigabytes, 2 hours, yikes. Well, I think Take-Two Interactive, speaking of video games, is going to report earnings after the bell tomorrow. So we will definitely cover that. And then we are getting some manufacturing data tomorrow as well. Destructionist Tom says, another issue in Canada for the farmers is the carbon tax on farming supplies. You don't want to know how much they are paying for fuel, seed, and fertilizer. Yeah, so Destructionist, that is a great point. And I think we're actually going to get a little bit of insight on that on Friday. I believe John Deere, is going to report earnings Friday after the bell or after the market closes. And I've been reading a ton of crazy stuff about how pre-owned farm equipment is selling for almost double the price of just regular retail value 3 or 4 years ago when it was first on the market. That's how crazy things are getting. I mean, the fertilizer stocks are ramping. I think that's just very telling about the kind of market we're in. But yeah, so Friday, May 20th, Deere reports results for its 2022 fiscal second quarter. And they're definitely probably going to give us some insight about what a lot of their customers are saying. Samsung says Russia exports a lot of the fertilizer we need. I think you're 100% correct on that. Dennis is looking forward to watching the eclipse a little later. Soho says, Tom, Canada's population will come to the US after the coming collapse. Interesting thought there, Soho. But guys, check out the full moon now. I mean, wow, that is beautiful. Daniel G says, Tom, I'd like to invest on hotels. What do you suggest? So I don't really know too much about investing, getting in the hotel business. Well, I guess the only exposure, I guess a little bit to like the, what would you call it? Like the services hospitality industry is, you know, I was doing an Airbnb in my house for a little bit, but I think I'm just going to rent out the individual rooms. But I don't know, I think there's, especially after COVID, a lot of that taught us that that's a pretty big risk, right? So I don't know if I would ever want to go into the hoteling business, especially what COVID taught us, that the governments could shut down your business overnight. So I think the best sort of diversity plays for a small business owner is probably going to be all online software businesses or e-commerce businesses, in my view. Because e-commerce business is very hard for the government to shut that down, right? I mean, even if we have another pandemic or just another craziness overreach from the government, it's not like they could say, hey, you can't order anything offline, but they can tell you to shut down your hotel. Arnold is here, says, hey Tom, good to see you. Arnold, the ABX girl, says that is interesting. I think many people in the US are now considering Canada due to politics in the news. Yeah, well, I mean, we were talking a little bit yesterday, the ABX girl, about how there's been a record number of visa applications for people trying to leave mainland China, Beijing, and Hong Kong, as well as Shanghai. And that's because they're still locking down their citizens over 2,000 COVID cases. It's insane. And that's sort of what my bullish thesis on the United States is going forward. So if we look out 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, I think the United States is still going to be in a very, very good spot. Because if you think about it, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're just coming out of college, where is the capital formation going to flow? Right? Are you going to say, hey, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm just coming out of college, I'm going to go start a business in Shanghai? Probably not. I mean, everybody's on lockdown there. People want freedom. And, there's an old saying that capital will always flow to the path of least resistance. Capital will always flow to the path of least resistance. And I think that, especially ever since World War II, the path of least resistance has been to the United States, because we have, maybe a little bit less so now, but we have a free market capitalistic system here in the United States where people from all over the world can come here to get rich. Where I see a big, big mishap from the United States, and this is where I think we're doing a really, really terrible job as a country, and I think is the issuance of visas. So I think with the H-1B visa system here in the United States, I think there's only 65,000 visas that are issued for H-1B every single year. And there's a lot of technology companies that are actually going to Washington next week to lobby people in the government to say, look, we need software engineers, we need good salespeople, we need people with skills, and there's just not enough people here in the United States. So it's either we're going to hire somebody remote that's going to be in their home country, or you could issue more visas and then we could have them come here and work in the United States building products and services here. And I think that's why over the past couple of years, you've actually seen a lot of immigrants go to universities in Canada, because it's actually a little bit easier to get a visa to live and work and get an education in Canada as opposed to what it is here, which is very unfortunate, and I think the United States needs to fix that ASAP, like really, really ASAP, because we want the world's best and brightest. And if you look historically, the United States has been an absolute brain drain from everywhere else in the world, and I think we want that to continue as a country. BB says, hi, are you originally from New York City? Yes. So we do streams between New York City and Miami. So I'm going to be in Miami all next week, but I am going to be flying to New Jersey actually the week of the 25th, because I have a cybersecurity conference I need to attend. So I will be in Atlantic City, New Jersey the week of the 25th. T. Campbell is here. Says, smart immigration would be great way to make up for the decrease in natural population growth, especially for states such as West Virginia and Mississippi. 100%. I was talking to actually one of my good friends, a couple of my buddies that were here originally from South Korea, and they're like, Tom, it's easier to get into the United States illegally than it is legally. And that's a really, really sad reality. So it's easier to come to the United States the wrong way than it is the right way, which is unfortunate. So I think our government needs to do a little bit better job of allowing people to come here the right way and issuing those H-1B visas. Sebastian says, I saw you at AK's live stream. Yes, so I did. I was actually walking back from my workout. I did a quick workout. I was in Wynwood, and then I passed our good friend AK on the bridge, which was awesome. Delargo says, how I can keep building a YouTube channel community with an audience that growed mostly with the help of a bull market missing New York City. DeLargo, good to see you. I'm not too sure about, I'm like the worst person to ask, to be honest, but thank you for your donation, by the way. I'm the worst person to ask about like YouTube strategy for growth. Like, I don't do any sort of SEO or anything. I just sort of turn the camera on and go. And there's been a lot of people within the YouTube community that have told me like, hey, if you do this or do that, you know, and really put effort into like SEO and all that type of stuff, I would have a bigger audience, but I just really don't have the time for it. I mean, usually after work, I just throw up the live stream and we hang out. So I really have no idea, like, to be totally transparent, about any sort of YouTube strategy for like growth and things like that. The only things that anecdotally people watch more is like when there's bad weather. So if I'm walking around or doing a stream in a torrential downpour, more people tend to watch it, which is not always fun for me. Don Smith, this is free baby formula if you jump the fat. Yeah, I mean, that's another problem we have in the United States right now, is a baby formula shortage, which is embarrassing to say the least. Hey, FredX is here, welcome. Sebastian is here. But Delarg, thank you so much, I appreciate it. Samantha R is here, says, hey Tom and everybody, good to see you. Junior says, what the heck, Tom? What you doing in Miami? Where the heck is Action Kid? You two should do a duo live stream, nice to see you. Hey, Junior, so we did. Action Kid was actually on my stream, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago. But yes, I will be in Miami all next week, but I will be in New Jersey, unfortunately. Well, I shouldn't say unfortunately. I will be in New Jersey. I think futures market, if you look at the S&P 500 E-mini futures, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, ticker symbol YM, and the NASDAQ 100, ticker symbol NQ, I think everything is up across the board fractionally. Now, that doesn't mean we're out of the woods. If you look at a daily chart of all of the major indices, and if you throw up a 50-day moving average or a 200-day moving average, we are actually extremely extended to the downside. So if we look back throughout history, the most ferocious rallies happen during bear markets. So we could easily rally all the way back to the 50-day moving average, the 200-day moving average, and roll right back over. And I think this market is really predicated on the Federal Reserve. So should the Federal Reserve continue to hike interest rates, should the Federal Reserve, starting June 1st, allow a lot of those mortgage-backed securities as well as U.S. Treasuries to roll off the balance sheet, I think we're still going to see some downside pressure or downward pressure here for the stock market. Especially now that Joe Biden is really pushing Jerome Powell to get inflation under control. They need to crush inflation before the midterm elections, or it's not going to fly well for the Democrats. Because if we think about it like this. 90% or over 90% of all the equities, which means like the stocks and all of like the stock market, is owned by the top 10 to 1%. So all the top 10%. So the vast majority of voters do not own stocks. But the vast majority of voters are getting hit and getting pinched really hard with all this inflation. So I think Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell is going to allow the stock market to die temporarily until they can get inflation under control. Now, how fast and how long does the stock market fall? I mean, that's anybody's guess, but you know, if we look back to 2008 financial crisis, I think the S&P 500 fell to which it was trading at 8.8 times forward earnings. I think right now we're at about 20 times forward earnings, I think. But you can correct me if I'm wrong. I got to go look that up. But I don't think we'll get that low. I think if we can get down into the mid-teens, 15 times forward earnings, 13 times forward earnings, I think that would be very advantageous for people to buy the market in their retirement accounts. bad news for the midterms for the Democrats? I mean, it very well could if inflation continues to ramp. If inflation continues to ramp, I agree with you. Ryan Royal says, we want to see Tom survive bad weather in New Jersey. You know, I was thinking about maybe I'll have time to do at least one stream from Atlantic City, pending the weather. But I should be there for about 24 hours on the 25th. The ABX girl says, Tom, is there a formula shortage in Canada? I read under the last administration, they stopped Canadian cans to the US. I'm not so sure about that. I'm not so sure. Any of our Canadian friends, please chime in. Are you guys experiencing a shortage in baby formula as well? Here in the United States, it is a big problem. I told you guys a story, I think on last night's stream, about my Uber driver. Literally, as she was driving me, she was calling every single CVS, every single Whole Foods, every single Target in the area. Couldn't get the baby formula she needed. It was heartbreaking. Lilith says, Tom, I spent $4.29 on eggs the other day. People were not buying them because of the cost. That's insanity. That's insane. Yeah, well, Lila, one of the things that's kind of cool about the place I have it here in Florida, so I have a mango tree, a coconut tree, and an avocado tree as well. So I've been eating the majority of my fruit just from the trees, which has been on going to the store. I think if you walk into a Whole Foods and want to buy a mango, you're probably going to spend like $3 on one individual mango. It's insane. Nick Rock says you should stream from the Lucky Shack Arcade, the old boat show. Maybe we'll do that. Oh, check out how rough the water is, everybody. Insane. Colin Watt says, hey Tom, there's no baby formula shortage here in Canada. Well, that's good for you guys. Roberta's here, says, hey Tom, I pay that for eggs anyway. At the health food store is usually $5 to $6. You know, as I was walking to Wynwood, I'm not sure why the water is so rough. Maybe we're getting a storm tonight. I'll have to check it out. But, you know, as I was walking in Wynwood today, there was actually live, like, wild roosters and chickens running around. It was actually kind of cool. Junior, good to see you. But everybody, check out this interesting statistic here out of Barron's. So speaking about the housing market, there's a 25%. Wow, look at that plane. So 25% is the decline in mortgage originations in the first quarter from a year earlier as interest rates rose. So 25% decline already in mortgage originations. Think about that for a minute. Because guys, the Federal Reserve has only hiked interest rates twice. And we already have a 25% decline in mortgage originations. But let me take the other side of that argument for a second. Because I never want to put out just one side of the argument to say, oh, it's going to be a big crash, it's going to be a big nightmare. In all fairness, there is massive shortages in terms of supply for homes. We have not yet seen the environment where a lot of supply is coming on the market, so people are bidding for too few homes. So it's not like, I mean, the demand could very well still be there. I do think interest rates is going to put a little bit of pressure on demand, but if we look at the entire picture, the supply is still very, very low here in the United States for homes. So I don't think people should be freaked out just yet because mortgage originations dropped 25%. I still think it was a pretty good deal for a lot of the institutional buyers. So if we think about like a BlackRock or a Blackstone that actually bought multiple packages of single family homes and multi-family homes, even though they may have paid a premium for those, I was going to say products, of those homes, they have them at very, very cheap interest rates. So essentially the money is free for them. So even if they take a little bit of a hit by property values decreasing a little bit, if the rents stay as crazy as they are right now, I mean, we just talked about a statistic that here in Miami, the median rent is $4,300 a month. So if rents can stay stable, if not even increase, if property values just decline a little bit, it's still a good deal for all these institutions, because if inflation is printing, the CPI is printing at about 8.5%, but they borrowed all of this money less than 3%, well, they got the money for free anyway, and they're making money off of the cash flows of the property. So I still think it's a relatively good deal if you guys have managed to lock in rates sub 3% or at 3%. I think you're still going to do well over the long term. But guys, check this out. The water is still starting to splash over here. The tide is insane. Chill Trills, as I doubt it dropped much in Miami. Well, if we look back at the biggest market declines, in 2008, the markets that got hit the most was Las Vegas, Nevada, as well as Miami, Florida. Because if we think about what happened back then, when everybody was all euphoric, everybody was buying, second and third homes in really, really nice and fun places like Miami and Vegas. But this time, a lot of people and a lot of businesses have relocated here for the long term. And a lot of the buyers here are actually very, very well qualified. I told you guys I was reading that article in the Miami Herald today that says a lot of foreign buyers are actually coming and paying 30% over asking price with all cash. So they're coming in, oh, look at this dog. So they're coming in and buying these homes, $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 homes here in Miami, but they're buying them for all cash, right? So if we think about what the issue was in 2008, the issue was the default risk, the counterparty risk there. So it's very hard to default on a mortgage if you don't have one, right? So if I'm a foreign investor or a foreign person that just wants to buy a second or third home in Miami to try to move some of my money out of Argentina, out of China, or wherever in the world, if I buy that for cash, I mean, it's going to be hard to sort of get into frothy territory, because where is the risk there? I mean, they're paying all cash. The only way it could turn bad is if all of these foreign investors, and I'm using air quotes here, start to dump their properties all at the same time, which will flood the market with a lot of supply. So I think the biggest thing now, especially in places like Miami and even New York, I mean, if you look at Long Island, New York, the same thing is happening. Once COVID hit, there was a lot of people that wanted just to escape the city to a little bit bigger house. Maybe the kids can have a front or a backyard to play in. I mean, the supply of homes on Long Island is almost like non-existent. So I think the same thing is happening in Long Island, New York, and other places across the country as well. So I think the only way we're really going to see big, drastic declines in the housing market is if everybody starts to sell their homes at the same time, which I don't think is going to be the case, because everybody is locked in at very, very low rates. So it would not be advantageous to do that. 6-1 says, do they allow negative gearing in the US? I'm not sure what that is. Christina says, Tom, are you going to check the blood in the next 2.5 hours from now? The blood. Is it going to be a blood moon or something like that? Roberta is here, says, in Phoenix, my daughter was there. Nice. Jimmy Blend says, hey Tom, did you walk by Action Kid today? I did walk by Action Kid today. Dutchman says, Japanese investors buying homes in Phoenix offering $30K to $50K over asking in cash and renting them out for high rents. Yeah, I mean, the same thing is happening right here. The same thing is happening right here in Miami. It's quite weird. And I've been hearing from a lot of my friends who live on Long Island. I'm a Long Islander myself, but I'm hearing the same thing is happening there. So it's really interesting times we have going on here in the United States. Hey, Daryl says, Tom, Walking Commuter mentioned you on his live stream yesterday and all good. Yeah, I always get a lot of emails asking if I'm Walking Commuter. which is very flattering. Thank you guys for saying that. But yeah, Walking Commuter is a fellow streamer out of New York City. Great show if you want to see what New York City looks like during the morning hours. I think he tends to do a lot of his streams during the morning commuting to work. So I tune into those quite often. Cynthia Beals says a neighbor sold his house and is moving to Sarasota, Florida from Staten Island. Wow. I wonder who he sold it to. But Daryl, good to see you. NE says, Tom, another point is don't you think the people that bought their houses this time could actually afford it, unlike 08? Yeah, I think and I think that has to do with a lot of government regulation, right? Because as we talk about all the time on the channel, the government will always step in after the fact to try to clean up the mess. So in 2008, and I really, really, truly believe during 2006 to about 2007, a lot of people were, unfortunately, they succumbed to, I think, is unethical sales practices by a lot of these real estate agents and these mortgage brokers. That is just my opinion. I think that the vast majority of them did not tell their clients about the adjustable rate mortgages. They were not honest with their clients to say, hey, you only make $50,000 a year, you probably can't afford a $450,000 house, right? And since lending standards or underwriting standards were so low, pretty much non-existent, the only thing that they cared about was just closing the deal. And now, underwriting standards are extremely, extremely tough. I mean, I almost didn't get the loan on my house, and I make a pretty decent income, and I had to mandatory. The bank, JP Morgan, essentially said, if you don't put down 25% on this property, we're not doing the deal. Like, they straight up said that. They're like, we will not do the deal if you do not put down at least 25%. And I wanted to put down 3%. I wanted to use a lot of leverage on this for different reasons. Obviously, please be careful with leverage. The only reason why I wanted to leverage it out is because I could get the money at 3%, and I had the money to buy the house cash. So if in an event something really bad happened, I could just pay it off. But yeah, I mean, they made me put down 25%, which is insane. So the underwriting standards is definitely a lot better now. You're right, Annie. Check out this guy on his boat. JF says, were you buying an investment property? No. So technically, JF, and that's a good question. So JF actually has a really good question. It was not, but technically the house is now zoned as a legal two-family. But at the time of purchase, it was a single-family purchase. The reason why they wanted me to put down 25% is because during 2020, I actually left my employer, and I'm technically self-employed. And if you're self-employed, the banks want to see at least 2 years of income of at least $250,000. And at the time I bought the property, I've only been self-employed for about a year. So there was no wiggle room whatsoever on that piece. Hey, Alton is here. Says, hey Tom, how's it going? It's going really good. It's going really good. It is going to be a very, very busy week on Wall Street next week. Very, very busy week. We are going to have a lot of economic data coming out. Here, I'll show you guys the W Hotel. NE. So NE, that is like standard across the board, right? So if you are self-employed, you need to buy anything. You need 2 years of $250,000 plus income. It's very strange why lenders want that, but I understand. because you are technically at a higher risk of having your income be very volatile if you work for yourself. But if you are on a W-2, let's say you work at a Salesforce, an Oracle, or whatever, any type of company, when you have the banks actually like that a lot better, as opposed to if you are self-employed and maybe one year you make 50,000, the next year you make $1 million, the next year you make $2 million, and then the next year after that you make $60,000. It's not about the amount you make, it's the volatility and the predictability of the income. So it's actually easier to get a loan if you have a solid, steady, full-time job. So that's actually one of my regrets. I wish I had stayed at my company a little bit longer, just so I could have used those paychecks to said, hey, I'm employed, but I just missed that cutoff by a couple months. But I guess you live and you learn. Hemp Lord, what's up, man? Good to see you, Hemp Lord. Welcome. Uh, 6-1 says, Tom, negative gearing simply means borrowing to invest. Negative gearing happens when costs of owning a rental property exceed the rent returns you earn. Very interesting. Oh, so you mean like if you're underwater, perhaps? I'm not sure. It doesn't seem like a good idea, but I would suspect that you're probably not allowed to do that. Ed says, will Apple stock go down to 100? Beats me. I'm not sure. I think the biggest thing with equities, if we listen to what Paul Tudor Jones and Stanley Druckenmiller, which are the greatest investors of all time, the number one sort of driver of the market is the Fed, is the Federal Reserve. And it seems as if they are finally going to start to take inflation serious. And ever since 2008, or the lows of the financial crisis, there's been a 95% correlation between the price of equities and the expansion of the Fed's balance sheet. And if we remember correctly, 2 weeks ago when we heard from the Fed, they said we are going to raise interest rates 50 basis points, and on June 1st, we are going to start to unwind our balance sheet. So the Federal Reserve has a massive, nearly $9 trillion balance sheet made up of mortgage-backed securities as well as U.S. Treasuries. And that also puts pressure on rates, because if we think about it, bond yields move inverse to price. So if you have an entity like the Fed that puts a constant bid in the market, rates are going to stay low. But if they start to dump these assets off their balance sheet, it's going to do the inverse effect. There's not going to be as much liquidity in the market. Rates are probably going to continue to go up. Valuation standpoint, if I'm a big tech company and the vast majority of my corporate earnings are predicated in the future, let's say 1 or 2 years or 3 years or 5 years in the future, if rates are higher today, that means my future earnings are now devalued. And that's why in times of high interest rates, value stocks tend to outperform growth. Because if you can grow at all costs when interest rates are zero, and if you're expecting to earn, let's say, $5, $10 a share in 5 years, well, those earnings are going to be more lucrative today. But if interest rates go up, those future earnings are now devalued. They're not as lucrative, or they're not worth as much. So unless the Federal Reserve changes their tune and starts to support the market, I think that stocks could continue to decline. But that does not mean we can't have very, very ferocious bear market rallies. But I think the number one thing that I'm waiting for is just a follow-through day. So if we do have a follow-through day at any point, you do have to sort of nibble and buy quality stocks just to let the market pull you back in. But we will stay up to date on that for sure. Hey, Penelope is here. Welcome, Penelope. So Penelope is from another beautiful part of the country, Tennessee. Also a very, another one of those housing markets, Tennessee, where It's really been on a huge tear. I mean, especially Nashville. You know, I've only been to Nashville, Tennessee one time. And this was way back in the day when I used to work for AT&T. I actually had a meeting in the AT&T building, got canceled, so I spent the majority of the day at Vanderbilt University. Beautiful place. But even now, Tennessee, Nashville is getting really expensive now, which is crazy. Hey, FredX is here, welcome. Jones says, hey Penelope. Yogi says, what is a follow-through day? Yogi, so if you want to learn a little bit more about what a follow-through day is, I always write about it in the Behind the Street newsletter. So if you type !news, N-E-W-S, in the chat, the Nightbot will drop the link to the Behind the Street newsletter. But essentially, a follow-through day is something that was coined by William J. O'Neill, the founder of Investors Business Daily newspaper. And essentially on any sort of rally attempt, hey, hello, it was a dog at my feet. On any sort of rally attempt, on the third attempt of any rally day, if the market closes higher than the previous day's close on higher than average volume over the past 2 trading days, that tends to signal, or that is what's considered a follow-through day, and it tends to signal that institutional investors are starting to buy the market or starting to redeploy capital in the market. But Investors Business Daily, if you want to check out their YouTube channel, they have a lot of videos where they outline exactly what a follow-through day is on their YouTube channel, or you can just sign up for the Behind the Street newsletter, punch in your email, and I will send you that newsletter every single Tuesday after the market closes. Wendy England says, Tom, I like Memphis, Tennessee more than Nashville, but then I love the blues and not the country music. Funny. Wow, Ryan Royal says, Tom, I am in Tennessee and there's a lot of people moving here from California. Wow. You know, I've been even seeing California license plates here in Miami, believe it or not. As crazy as that sounds. But here's the W Hotel we are outside of. And it's actually getting really, really windy. I think there's supposed to be a big rainstorm this coming up morning. You can see the palm trees going crazy here. But this is the very famous W Hotel. And you can see the beautiful full moon we have in the back. Jenny L says, beautiful area. I hope to visit Florida again. Please come visit. Please come visit. It's a beautiful, beautiful spot here in Brickell. We are looking at the Bank of America Tower. So let's cross the street here and then we will walk back over the bridge. Ryan Royal says, I don't understand why they're moving to Tennessee. There's nothing to do here. Well, I think just people that were city dwellers just want more space, right? You know, another thing, I think Tennessee is one of those states where there's no income tax, I believe. I don't think there's any state income tax in Tennessee, if I'm not mistaken. Wendy England says, Memphis barbecue is amazing. Yeah, that is true. Six1 says, Tom, I was watching something about the water shortage causing a domestic migration from the southwest US. Yeah, dude, so that's actually a really good point. You know, it's really, really horrible what's happening in California because regardless of the horrible politics, California is a beautiful, beautiful state. It's one of the states that I really want to visit the most. But the wildfires, I mean, I don't think I would ever buy a house in California anymore because of the wildfires. It's insane. You know, there's been a lot of reports of insurance companies, they won't even, you know, underwrite any of these properties now because of all these wildfires. So it's really, really crazy. I mean, some people said it's always been like this, but I don't know. Even a little piece of anecdotal data, I never remember all of these wildfires when I was like 8, 9, 10 years old. It seems like just in the past couple of years they've been getting worse. You know, I'm not sure if you guys remember, but this time last year we were actually doing a live stream in New York City, and you could see the smoke from the California wildfires in Midtown Manhattan. It was the most bizarre thing ever. I'm not sure if you guys remember that stream, but that was back when we would do the skateboarding streams. JY63245N says Tennessee started collecting taxes since October 2021. Miguel says, good evening from Mexico. Welcome everybody from Mexico. Good to see you. Mexico is a beautiful place. Another place I want to visit is Mexico. The ABX girl says, Tom, my friend has a family in Las Vegas and moving east due to the water situation. Yeah, it's crazy. You know, Arizona has one of the most advanced water treatment facilities or infrastructure in the entire world. And that's mainly because they have so many semiconductor chip fabricators in Arizona. And the chip fabricators, or for semis, need a massive amount of water. So you really need to be conservative with the water. So in Arizona they actually have extremely high tech water recycling and treatment facilities and technology. But it's insane. You know, I've always said I think we should probably try to figure out a way where we could make a cross-country pipeline from the Great Lakes and even the Finger Lakes in New York. So the Finger Lakes region is in upstate New York, just east of Syracuse, New York, and it's some of the cleanest water in the entire world. I think we should invest the money into a cross-country pipeline to bring fresh water from New York, fresh water from the Great Lakes over to Arizona and California, and you just put a small tax on it, and then it could actually help those states like New York and, you know, Illinois make some money. I think that'd be a good idea. Hey, Bagels and Walks is here. It's a safe walk tonight, Tom. Thank you, Bagels and Walks. Ed is here. Love your logo, Ed. Love the University of Miami. I hope to do a stream at the University of Miami very soon. Since I heard Bill Maher say something about that once about the water pipeline. Yeah, I think it would be a good idea, but I don't think it'll ever probably materialize, in my opinion. But this is the Bank of America Tower. So Ed, the only reason why I don't think it will ever materialize is because of politics. You know, I think a lot of people are too caught up about, you know, states fighting amongst each other, but we have to realize, like, guys, we all live in the same country, right? I mean, if California burns down and if Arizona runs out of water, that's not good for the United States as a whole. But it doesn't seem like people think that way, unfortunately. N.E. says, Tom, I'll always remember how at the end of The Big Short, it stated how Michael Burry currently only invested in water. Yeah, well, I think Bill Gates is not only buying up a lot of the farmland in the United States, but investing heavily in the water treatment technologies and startups too. So that is a good point. Speaking of water, it's starting to rain on us right now. Ed says, I think it's more about messing with the ecosystem. Yeah, so Ed, you were actually right about that. There was an interesting article in the Wall Street Journal about 2 or 3 weeks ago about why just pipelines in general, just talking about oil and things like that, never really materialize because there's so much, not only politics, but to your point, like, they're like, oh, this is protected land, so we don't want to build over it, things like that. So it's always something, but we have to figure out a solution. I'm not sure what that solution is, but we need to figure it out. But let's take cover under this building. So look at the lobby of the Bank of America Tower. I actually have only seen this lobby today, but look at how beautiful it is. It's all brand new. Beautiful here. But everybody, on Thursday, May 19th, the National Association of Realtors is reporting existing home sales for April. Economists believe that they fell to a seasonally adjusted annual rate of 5.6 million homes sold from 5.77 million homes sold in March. It will be the third consecutive monthly decline of home sales in America. So that's another key piece of economic data. And I think a lot of people, and again, we talked about this at the beginning of the stream, a lot of people are like, existing home sales are falling, that means there's no demand. Well, not necessarily. I do think demand is tapering off a little bit because interest rates are going up. But if we actually look at the data and really hammer down on it, there's still almost no supply. You know, I was doing a quick search on Zillow for homes in Long Island, New York, and homes here in Miami. And I mean, for a little shack, like that needs to be totally redone, it needs so much work. Like these things are going for 400 grand. I'm like, oh my God. So there's just no supply, there's no inventory of homes for people to even buy. Now, I'm not saying that's gonna stay like that forever. I do think that interest rates moving up is going to put pressure on home prices, but you know, a lot of the times you'll see these big headlines on CNBC to say, hey, you know, it's the third month in a row, home sales are falling. I mean, you gotta look at the entire picture in my view, and the entire picture doesn't say we are suffering from a lack of demand. It's actually the opposite. It's actually a lack of supply. But that is coming up on Thursday. So we are going to get existing homes sales data. Yogi says, if we can treat wastewater into drinking water, why can't we do that with ocean water? Well, I think they do that in Dubai, don't they? Or in the UAE. You know, and it's actually be good because I think we do have some viewers from the UAE here. So maybe please feel free to chime in. But am I right on that, everybody? Doesn't the UAE do that with seawater? Don't they have treatment facilities to turn seawater into fresh drinking water? Sabrina Fair is here. So Soho, can you explain a little? What do you mean? John says, yes, water is the most important. Christina says, Tom, Bill Gates has organic seed farm on an island in Norway. He's in charge of elite food chain. Interesting. Don Smith says, Uncle Warren owns the trains. Yeah, that's true. Eddie says, desalination would solve most of the world's water shortage issues. Well, isn't that technology being worked on right now in Dubai? You know, there's also other crazy technologies that Dubai is working on, or even does. I think they even make artificial clouds too to increase rain. But I'll quickly tell you where we are. So we very seldom walk over here, but this is in between the Bank of America Tower. Beautiful place here. Usually during the day, you'll see hundreds, if not thousands of people here drinking coffee, getting lunch on their lunch break. It's almost very similar to Manhattan, but the bankers all work right here at the Bank of America Tower. Beautiful sort of courtyard here. And I'll give you a view of the very, very top of Bank of America Tower. And then we will walk across the bridge. Dennis Henry is here. I see Dennis. Good to see you, Dennis. Dennis Henry says, Tom, Arizona has been storing water underground for years. Never had rationing here. Yeah, and they also have very, very high-tech water recycling facilities because of all the semiconductor business that they do. Two Explorers videos, good to see you. This is desalination plants. They are used in the United States as well. MBA Elias is Tom. Currently, methods require about 14 kilowatt hours of energy to produce 1,000 gallons of desalinated water. I never knew that. NMB045, thank you for sharing that with us. NMB045 says little shacks with renovation go for at least 900 grand in Vancouver. Oh my God, man. Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. So I think a lot of people don't even take that into consideration. So let's assume you even get lucky enough to get yourself into a home. You know, the starter homes of today are very seldom move-in ready, right? I mean, sometimes you have to do a lot of work. And a lot of times what people will do is they'll borrow against the equity in their property to fund those necessary renovations in their home. But as we know, interest rates are going up, making money more expensive. I think a lot less people are going to borrow against their home equity because interest rates are so high now. But here's the front of Bank of America Tower. Don Smith says fog curtains are new and make fresh water, but only a small scale. Big World DDD says would love to move to Florida, but I would take a haircut, 20 to 30% of my salary, trying to figure out a workaround. So Big World DDD, what particular line of work are you in by chance, if you don't mind us asking? Because if you work in tech or you're a software engineer or something like that, you can probably keep your same exact salary and move down here. You know, a lot of my friends who are in private equity, venture capital, or just software engineers didn't have to take a pay cut at all, and they moved down here. So I guess it just depends on the line of work, but you are right. In general, let's say if you're moving from New York City to Florida, really any place in Florida, you're probably gonna have to take a pay cut. But if you are in the right industry, if you are in tech or something like that, you may not have to. You know, the CEO of Airbnb actually came out with an announcement on their earnings call saying that we are going to a full remote work policy. So you can work wherever you want, and depending on where you are, you don't have to give up anything in your salary. So if you want to live in New York City, that's fine. We won't give you a pay cut. If you want to move to Alaska, you could keep your same New York City salary. So pretty interesting, and I think a lot of tech companies are doing that to attract top talent, because we're seeing a lot of companies, more legacy traditional finance companies, like Goldman Sachs, they want a lot of their investment bankers back in the office. JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon has said this repeatedly, that they want their investment bankers back in the office. So you're seeing a lot of people jump from investment banking into tech because you could work remote. Ooh, everybody. This is probably the 5th or 6th time within 2 days we're going to see the drawbridge go up. So we're actually going to walk from Brickell, which is the central business district, back over the bridge to downtown Miami, where we will end the stream at the FTX Arena. So if you look straight ahead, you see all the blinking lights over there. The bridge is actually going to go up right now. So we'll walk towards that way, and hopefully we could see an amazing boat or something like that coming across. Maybe it's like a mega yacht or something like that. We'll see. Eddie says the tax benefit of moving to Florida is tremendous. That is true. I could vouch for that. Very, very tremendous. Especially if you're moving from a place like New York City, like I did. Wow, everybody, quick check at this moon. Beautiful, beautiful full moon here. Dennis Henry, good to see you. Brad's brain is here. What's up, Brad? Good to see you. Wow, Big World DDD says nurse. Wow, that's amazing, man. I don't even know how to pronounce that. Anesthetis. But excuse my ignorance for that, but that sounds fantastic. You know, if you're a nurse, what do you think about, or what are your thoughts on being a visiting nurse? Because supposedly visiting nurses can make like $400,000, $500,000 a year, something I was reading about. Or traveling nurse, are they called? Like traveling nurses? Anybody have any insights on that? Anybody have any insights on traveling nurses as a career? Hey, Homer Sanchez says, hey Tom, ready for the blood moon? Well, thank you so much. Hopefully our battery will stay intact until then. So when is the blood moon? Are we gonna see it on the stream, or what's going on with that? Hey, Yogi Bear fan says, hey Tom, good evening. Hey Yogi, good to see you. Big World DDD says, travel nurses or contract assignments do pay very well. So Big World DDD, what do you think about that? Like, what are your thoughts about potentially doing something like that? Or do you think there's not enough work-life balance in those type of careers, or sort of what are your thoughts? And the reason why I ask is, if you're new to this channel, we try to talk about all different career paths, because we have people that not only work in tech and investment banking, but nurses, we have doctors, lawyers, plumbers, HVAC mechanics. There's a diverse group here, and there's also a lot of people that are looking to change careers. So any thoughts or opinions you can provide there to help the group, much appreciated. Hey, Eyeglass Lady is here, says, hey Tom, a lunar eclipse will be tonight. Eddie Grimes says, the nurses can make 30% more quite easily. Wow. Morris is right at 10 Eastern Standard Time. Big World DDD says, Tom, it's very dependent on your personal preference and unique circumstances. Interesting. So here's all the traffic backing up over the bridge. But hopefully we'll be seeing the blood moon tonight. But if you guys are enjoying the stream so far, feel free to leave a like on the video and subscribe if you are new. We go live 5 days a week at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time, talking about the financial markets and the like. So we'd love to have you here for that. But now we are crossing the bridge and we are looking at the brand new Aston Martin building here, which is going to be one of the most ultra luxury buildings in Miami. And when it is completely finished, it is going to glow bright white. So it is going to be a staple to the skyline here. NMB 045 says, Tom, half of my college were foreign students. So many foreigners are choosing Canada a lot over the United States. Yeah, NMB 045, you're 100% right, because the United States has dropped the ball big time on visas. I think there's only 65,000 H-1B visas that are issued every single year. And I think there's hundreds of thousands of applicants. And in 2 weeks, there's actually going to be major technology CEOs in the United States going to Congress, going to DC to tell them, guys, you need to start to issue more H-1B visas, because if not, we're going to start to have to outsource a lot of these tech jobs overseas and have people work remote from overseas, which is not good, because that means that economic activity will not happen here in the United States. It's going to happen somewhere else. So Canada's actually done a really, really good job at that, NMB 045, of allowing people in to the country that are extremely smart. Hey, G is here, says, just join your channel. You are the best live streamer and the smartest. Well, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate it. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Hey. Wow, guys, check this out. Hey, Dow Jones is here. Dow Jones, thoughts on Bitcoin or ETH? So as you guys know, I've been posting on Twitter for about, I don't know, the last month or 2 months now, saying I think Bitcoin needs a final flush to the 200-week moving average, right down to about 27,000. Over the weekend, I actually deployed a little bit of capital to accumulate more of my Bitcoin position. You know, I think that big fallout with that Ponzi scheme, well, I shouldn't say that. I don't want to rub it in, because a lot of people lost a lot of money in that Terra Luna thing. But I've been telling people, guys, you gotta, the vast majority of all of these alternative coins, a lot of these altcoins, a lot of them are scams, a lot of them are rug pulls. So just, you know, if something is promising you a 20% risk-free return, I mean, you gotta use some common sense to say that's probably a scheme. But that's just my advice. But I actually did add a little bit to my core Bitcoin holdings at that huge dump, because essentially what I think we're seeing right now is a big liquidity crisis. A lot of people are getting liquidated, and I think a lot of people were forced to sell their Bitcoin because they were caught up in this ridiculous Ponzi scheme, which was Terra Luna. Pamela says, do you think the market is going to crash this week? Well, I'm not sure. I think we could have a pretty sustained bounce. I mean, just look at the NASDAQ, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and the S&P 500. We are actually quite extended to the downside in relation to their 250-day moving averages. And if we look at a bear market, the most ferocious rallies actually happen during bear markets. So what the market will do is sucker a lot of people in, and then it'll roll right back over at those key moving averages. And there's a couple reasons for this, because a lot of the times you'll have big institutional investors with big short positions on, right? And essentially when you're naked short something, essentially what you have to do to close out your short position is buy back the stock. Because essentially what you're doing when you're shorting is you go to your broker dealer or your prime broker, and what you have to do is borrow those shares. You actually have to borrow shares from your broker in hopes to actually sell them back at a lower price. So you borrow at a particular price from the broker, betting on that particular asset will go down, in which case you buy them back at a cheaper price. So that creates some buying pressure there. So there's a distinction between buying pressure from short covering and buying pressure from initiating new long positions. And a lot of the quote-unquote buying activity during bear markets could be short covering rallies. Caddy says many nurses quit because they didn't want to work during COVID. Interesting. You know, I've been seeing a lot of these articles in the paper about the traveling nurses, and that's why I asked that question about just how lucrative it was. But it's definitely, you know, as one of the commenters said, it's definitely time consuming, a little bit probably more stressful perhaps. Hey, Spontaneous Crusades is here. Says, hey, what's up, Tom? Just gave you a like. Good to see you. Welcome, Spontaneous Crusades. Hope you're doing well. But the two biggest companies that are reporting earnings, in my view, this week is going to be Target and Walmart. And it's interesting, you know, we've been writing about this a lot in the Behind the Street newsletter. If you look at the stocks that are showing the most relative strength, these are stocks like Church & Dwight, right? Like ticker symbol CHD. Stocks like Walmart, your Costco's, your Targets. And if you look at the relative fund flows from the large institutions, a lot of the fund flows are going into these particular securities. So what does that tell you about the economic outlook from some of the biggest portfolio managers on the street? Well, to me, it tells me that they're probably prepping for a recession. Because if we're seeing all-time fund flows into a company like Church & Dwight, think about what Church & Dwight does. They make toothpaste, baking soda products, things like that, toiletries, toilet paper. And in a recession, people tend to cut back on spending, but they don't necessarily cut back on spending on necessary items. You know, if the United States rolls over into a recession, I'm still going to need to buy toothpaste, I'm still going to need to buy baking soda, I'm still going to need to buy shampoo and soap and things like that. Those are the necessities. And you know, it's strange, a lot of these tech companies, a lot of these high beta tech companies, their PEs or their multiples are getting so compressed that they're actually trading at lower multiples and lower valuations than a lot of these staples, which is extremely crazy. And that's what concerns me as well, because I think over the next coming weeks and months on CNBC and Bloomberg, you're going to see a lot of these portfolio managers talking up their book about how you should buy Coca-Cola and things like that. But the thing is, historically, these stocks are actually now getting a little bit frothy, overvalued, historical to their normal PE trend. So you never really want to style drift. If you are sort of like a growth stock momentum trader or whatever it is you do, you never really want to follow the new shiny object. So just keep that in mind as the weeks progress. Because on a PE basis or a forward PE basis, a lot of these staples are actually getting quite expensive. I shouldn't say expensive, but more expensive in terms of their historical trend. Dow Jones is here. Says bullish BTC and ETH long term. However, we are 2 years post halving. In history, this is where the top/bear market begins. I think you're 100% right. And also, there's about a 90% correlation between the NASDAQ and Bitcoin right now. So Bitcoin is trading like a very speculative technology stock. I do expect over time, over the next probably 5 to 10 years, for that trend to decouple. But as of right now, investors still view Bitcoin as a risk-on asset. And as the NASDAQ has been rolling over, so is Bitcoin. But historically, it has been a good buy right around that 200-week moving average. That is why I added to my Bitcoin position right around there this week. But for me, I don't trade Bitcoin. I've been accumulating it pretty much ever since I was in college, because one of the things that I want to do as I get older is use my Bitcoin position to collateralize it to acquire other hard assets, right? So instead of collateralizing my stock portfolio or actually putting up my own money to buy real estate, I think within the next 5 to 10 years, you are going to be able to collateralize or borrow against your Bitcoin to then go and buy big real estate deals. And that's what I want to do. So if I could allocate a small portion of my income to do that, it's almost like a risk-free return, right? Because it's such a small allocation. And at the end of the day, if something goes south on the deal, what are the banks going to take? The Bitcoin? All right, whatever. Spontaneous Crusade says, I have a feeling China is going to allow Bitcoin to be purchased when the price bottoms out. Well, here's something that's interesting. Again, I think if you want to spend the $10 a month, I'd just get a copy of the Wall Street Journal. You got to stay up to date on things and you'll learn a lot about economics in general. But there's so much capital right now that wants to leave China. Like, it's screaming to get out of China. So the middle class in Shanghai, the middle class in Beijing, and ultra high net worth individuals are right now actively making plans to remove some of their wealth from China. Now, the CCP doesn't like that, so they want to limit that at all costs. And this is why we've been talking about on yesterday's stream. Oh, my battery's gonna die. That's too bad. But that's why we were talking about on yesterday's stream, visa and passport applications in China are up almost 600% year over year, because they're still locking down their people over 2,000 COVID cases. So middle-class individuals and ultra-high net worth individuals are trying to remove their wealth from China. And I think that's why we're seeing yet another Chinese Bitcoin crackdown. But we've seen this in 2019. The same thing happened in 2017 at the top. And I think the CCP is trying to restrict fund flows out of the country and keep not only the wealth, but their people in as well. Cynthia Beal is here. Vinny Castellano, welcome. Yeah, so Dow Jones, that is true. You can borrow against your Bitcoin and ETH right now with technically DeFi, but I want to do it through like an actual institution, right? So I think in the future, and actually just a couple weeks ago, Goldman Sachs actually underwrote their first Bitcoin-backed loan. But until that starts to roll out across the full suite of banks, I don't think I'll do that. Because anything I say here is not investment advice. If you don't understand something, you probably shouldn't buy it. There's a lot of people that don't understand Bitcoin, that think it's a scam or a fraud. Well, if that's the case, you shouldn't buy it, right? You shouldn't buy anything that you don't understand. You should learn about it, educate yourself about it, and if it turns out after you've done all the research you think it's garbage, well then don't even think about it. You shouldn't buy it at all. But don't buy things just because somebody else is. That's a good way for you to lose money. Okay, where are we at, my friends? So this is Southeast 1st Street. We need to go down here. Yes, I think. But everybody, unfortunately, we are on about 10% battery. So I probably will end the stream in a minute here. Pamela says, I am scared of digital money. Well, so, I think about it this way. For me, I think if you really think about what the United States dollar is, it is a digital dollar already. The vast majority of the dollars, quote unquote, that are in circulating supply right now don't actually exist. I don't think a lot of people realize that, or maybe they do, but they don't think about it often. Like, there's not just trillions of actual physical bills. All of it's just digital dollars that are literally printed manually on a computer screen. So every time I go to the store, I don't pay with cash. I use Apple Pay. That's a digital form of payment. So I think, if you go to places like South Korea, Japan, very seldom do they use physical cash. Everything is all online. And I think that that's going to happen everywhere. So I think maybe the Gen Zers and the millennials are a little bit more used to digital money than other people. But I would argue we already have it right now. It just depends on how often, the frequency in which you want to use it, perhaps. But here's the very famous Intercontinental Hotel right here. But everybody, just to reiterate, on Thursday, May 19th, the National Association of Realtors will be reporting its existing home sales for April. Many economists on the street are expected home sales to come in at 5.6 million, as opposed to the 5.77 million in March. If that's the case, this will be the third consecutive monthly decline in home sales. So I think it's going to be very, very important to pay attention to that piece of economic data on Thursday. Tomorrow, Take-Two Interactive software reports. Take-Two Interactive is a big video game maker. Warren Buffett may actually have some activity in that, so we'll watch that. But on Monday, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York will release its Empire State Manufacturing Survey for May. Consensus estimate is for an 18.2 reading. After 3 readings close to or less than 0 before the year, April saw a surge to 24.6, indicating growth in the region's manufacturing is expanding. So we will keep our eye on that. For tomorrow, the Empire Manufacturing Survey will be out. We might as well cross this way, actually, now that we have the lights. Under the Metro Mover. And then I believe on Wednesday or Tuesday after the bell, we have Home Depot reporting earnings. We have Vodafone, JD, and Caterpillar and Moderna are hosting their investor days. So we'll talk about that. I'm very interested into what Caterpillar is going to say at their investor day, because if we think about this big Biden infrastructure bill, that should probably, well, let's just say this. A lot of Caterpillar supplies a lot of the manufacturing equipment, like the big backhoes and things like that. So I think we'll start to get a forward glimpse into what Caterpillar thinks for building and big infrastructure plans in the United States, because a lot of the times they'll give analysts forecasts of orders that they're getting on different contracts or big government contracts that they're winning or their customers are winning. So I think that'll be important to pay attention to. And then last but not least, Walmart and Target will be reporting earnings, and I think this is getting a little bit of a crowded trade on Wall Street. It seems like a lot of people are crowding into these names like Walmart, Target, Church & Dwight, because they're expecting a recession. And in recessions, people still need a place to shop that is affordable. People still need to buy toothpaste, toilet paper, and other toiletries, and baking soda. So I hope you guys enjoyed the stream. I had a fantastic time talking with all of you. It's always a pleasure. We do go live every single day, well, 5 days a week, at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time between Miami, Florida, and New York City. So if you want to join in on future streams, feel free to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. I know it is a short stream tonight, but my phone is out of battery. So thank you all for coming, and hopefully you enjoyed the conversation. I know I learned a lot tonight. So Cora Carpenter, thank you so much for coming. Pamela Taylor, have a good evening. MBA Elias, Samantha R, Wendy England, Otto, Big World DDD, much appreciated. And if you guys want to sign up for our free investing newsletter, every single Tuesday, or as of least recently it's been every other Tuesday, we write a free investing newsletter where we cover not only the US equities markets, but also fixed income markets, emerging markets, and the cryptocurrency market. So if you type !news, N-E-W-S, in the chat, the Nightbot will drop the link to the Behind the Street newsletter. Just punch in your email and you will be added to the list to receive it every Tuesday. And to the Mighty Bull, have a good night wherever you are, because there's always a bull market somewhere, and you just need to know where to look. And I'll see everybody right back here in the Magic City tomorrow, 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. Oh man, I think this is happening again. This happened on one of my other streams too. I keep pressing the end button, but it's frozen. This happened to me one at a time. Huh, I think my phone is frozen. I think the screen is frozen here, everybody. So I'm gonna have to turn off my phone. I think this happened to me once before. I'm not sure what's going on. Let me try to turn it off. All right, there we go. I got it. I'm going to turn off the phone. So I'll see you guys in the next one. Make it a great week. Have a good Monday.